Hi everyone, Need the Nap Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Twin Shadow album, Eclipse. Twin Shadow is the musical project of singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist George Lewis Jr., who a handful of years ago had wooed me with his dashing good looks, as well as alternative approach to synth and indie pop, with the album Forget, which had some fantastic tracks on it, such as Castles in the Snow or the song When We're Dancing. The album had kind of a low-budget sound to it, but still managed to come together with some really sensual, captivating songs. However, things turned kind of sour on the next album, Confess, where it seemed that the budget was upped and the sound clarity on this album was improved tenfold. But rather than kind of sticking with the sound and the style that George had established thus far, what he delivered on this album was kind of an uninspired rehash of old school synthesizer pop from the 80s. And sadly, with this new album over here, I think George is moving into even less appealing territory. This album is his major label debut, and it isn't really synth pop in the same way that Confess was synth pop, a style of music that is currently seeing a bit of a comeback now and at least has an established fan base following artists that are making more modern takes on synthesizer pop. Eclipse is moving into much riskier territory, if that wasn't already forecasted by the incredibly overblown lead single from this album, To the Top, a song that feels like a bit of adult-oriented arena rock circa 1984, complete with epic drum fills, whoa-woes, and some very grand piano chords. My first reaction to this track was basically just a look of shock, and while I have warmed up to it a little bit since its release, I haven't really been able to move beyond ironic enjoyment of this song. Whenever I hear this track, I just think of like huge, frothy ocean waves splashing up against a rocky shore as Baywatch babes just like run by in slow motion with like some epic pyrotechnics going on in the background. However, this song ends up being really the only track on the entire LP here that goes in more of an arena rock direction. The only other song that really kind of sort of flirts with that vibe is the song I'm Ready, which is almost as overwrought. But moving outside of these two songs, this album generally is just a series of okay songs applied to a series of incredibly corny and unlikable styles of rock and pop music. Very dated. And these songs are mixed and sort of produced with these incredibly boomy choruses, just really compressed, and occasionally a kind of pompous instrumentation. The entire LP kicks off with the song FLATLINERS, which isn't too bad of an open for this album. George comes on in the very subdued verses on this track with a bit of a flow to his voice that reminds me of like an old school like 90s R&B song. And then once the song explodes on the choruses, you breaking promises, you breaking promises. It's a pretty passionate chorus. For all of this album's cornball instrumentation, George can be a pretty compelling and captivating singer when he's really, trying to give an emotional performance. Conversely, we have songs on this album like Half-Life, where George's singing is actually kind of quiet in comparison to the instrumentation and very drained as well. This album, after the first track, even though it is a good start, it goes south very fast with the song When the Lights Turn Out, which on this track I feel like George is trying to cobble together some kind of Katy Perry, Carly Rae Jepsen level radio pop smash, but without the ultra slick production in the background to kind of back it up. The chorus on this track is just compressed and compressed and compressed to the point where the instrumentation kind of smudges together in a somewhat unappealing way. We get this jealousy and ecstasy sort of a mishmash of emotions on this track too. It just kind of feels like George is just grabbing at emotional lyric idea straws in any direction that he can, not just on this track but other tracks too, as George is saying things like, hold on to me, or making mention of heartstrings songs. It's no surprise that the lyrical approach on this album is as uninventive and as stagnant as the musical approach. The song Alone is a kind of hammy duet with Miss Lily Elise, and the song Old Love, New Love is maybe the most unflattering track on this entire album. It's like a bit of house pop, like some really trashy Eurodance type stuff, complete with the really punchy piano stabs. Dun, 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 dun. A lot like with the song To the Top, I feel like with this track, George is trying to bring back what was essentially a cultural headache. I'd rather listen to No Mercy's Where Do You Go? Which I can at least enjoy from a nostalgic standpoint. This just feels like a really bad portrayal of nostalgia, which honestly is just a feeling I can't get away from when listening to much of this album. Either the lyrics or the instrumentation is just unbearably cheesy, or we have some tunes on here where the vocal performance is just okay, or the choruses are compressed to the point where just the music isn't really that enjoyable, or we have some songs on the back end here that might be decent, but maybe they kind of cut off abruptly and they're just not that fulfilling. There's just a lot of things, in my opinion, at least for me, I mean, this is my view on this album, but there are a lot of things about this LP that are working against its enjoyability. I'm feeling a strong 2 to a light 3 on this thing. Transition! If you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Twin Shadow, Eclipse, forever.